In this activity, we'll be creating a program that demonstrates ownership. We will be using moving and borrowing in order to execute functions and automatically manage memory. Once you're ready, let's hop into Visual Studio Code and get started. Navigate to your Activities directory, and we are on Activity 11, so double-click on A11 to load the activity file. Once the activity file loads, review the topic and program requirements. Attempt to implement a solution on your own with the video paused, and once completed, resume the video and I will demonstrate my implementation as well as provide insights to the activity topic. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We can see that this activity topic is about ownership. The requirements are simply to print out the quantity and ID number of a grocery item. Our notes indicate that we need to use a struct for our grocery item. The struct needs to contain two I32 fields, one for the quantity and one for the ID number. We need to create a function to display the quantity and a function to display the ID number. I'm going to copy the notes into the code so I have a starting point. So we need to use a struct for the grocery item. So I'll create a new struct and I'll call it grocery item. We then need two I32 fields for the quantity and ID number. So I'll have one named quantity and ID. Next, we need to create a function to display the quantity. So I'll call my function display quantity, and it will accept a grocery item as a function parameter. We also need a function to display the ID number. So I'll call that display ID, and it will also accept a grocery item. Now all we need is to create some print line macros, and this will be the quantity. And we need to reference the quantity field within the grocery item. And then in display ID, we're just going to change this to ID. And now we have our functions set up. Now we just need to create a grocery item and then call the functions. I'll call my grocery item my item. It is a grocery item. I'm going to have 3 of those, and I'm just going to give it an ID of 99. Next, we need to call the functions. So I'll display the quantity of my grocery item, and then I'll display the ID of the grocery item. So far, so good. So let's run this and see what happens. We can run it by going to Terminal, click on New Terminal. We then do cargo run -q -bin. We are on activity 11, so type in A11. As we can see, we have an error. We used a moved value. So we moved the grocery item into this function, and then we tried to use it again later in this function. So we moved it here, and then we try to use it again here, and we can't do that. So we need to fix that. If you recall, when we create a variable, it's owned by its enclosing scope or block. So this is the scope or the block of code. So my item is owned by main. When we called display quantity here on line 33, ownership changed to the display quantity function. This means that once this block is completed, the grocery item will then be dropped by the display quantity function, and the memory will no longer be available. So once display quantity is called, my item is no longer in use. So when we try to use it again here, we can't because it was deleted in the display quantity function. To get around this, we have to borrow the information. So I'll modify my display quantity function and use the ampersand to indicate we're just borrowing the grocery item. We're not taking ownership, we're just borrowing. I'll do the same thing for display ID. And then when we call the functions, we want to indicate that we are letting these functions borrow the grocery item. So they're borrowing it with the ampersand. It's also called a reference. So we're referring to this item here, but we still keep the owner as main. So let's save it and run it, and it should run correctly. And here we have the quantity displayed and the ID number displayed as we expected. This concludes the activity on ownership. I'll see you in the next presentation.